Good morning and welcome to Maundy Thursday. Today is an important day in the liturgical calendar for the Christian year, and we are grateful that we have finally arrived to this moment after the long journey of Lent. This past Sunday we had Palm Sunday, where we witnessed and celebrated and experienced Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. And now we are arriving at Thursday evening, where Jesus did gather with those disciples in the upper room and broke bread and shared the cup and told about what was to come. We do hope that you will join us this evening for a worship service at 8 p.m., a Monday, Thursday service where we will have communion with one another, and where there will be a very special sermon presented by 13 Hitchcock members who will be giving us the living Last Supper, that we might truly experience what it might have been like to be gathered around that table, and then we will all partake of communion together. This is an important day, not just because it is the institution of the Lord's Supper, but also because this is really the beginning of Holy Weekend. This is when Jesus, after supper, goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and prays there and is in communion with God the Father in that moment, where the disciples fall asleep when they are supposed to be keeping watch, and then where Jesus is ultimately arrested. We are entering into this weekend where there are a myriad of emotions of up and down, of being gathered and told important information by Jesus, and then witnessing the suffering that is to come and preparing ourselves for Easter Sunday. There is one highlight I'd like to pick up just specifically about today, though. We really think most of all with Maundy Thursday about the institution of the Last Supper, but there is that other thing that happens in the Gospel of John on this day when Jesus is gathered with his disciples, and that is the washing of the feet. Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, the Son of God, the Messiah that has been so long awaited, takes off his outer robe and gets upon his knees in front of his disciples and washes their feet. Peter, of course, refuses, because that's the way Peter is. Peter says, "I should be washing your feet," but Jesus insists, because he wants the disciples to understand that part of being a Christian is to be a servant to other people. In fact, most of being a Christian is being a servant to other people. And so that is what we are called to do this day. We are called to be reminded that Jesus Christ, that God chose to descend, that God chose to humble God's self before humanity, to live as a human being, to feel all of the emotions, all of the pain, all of the suffering that goes along with that, so that in that ultimate act of sacrifice and of service, that we might be reconciled unto God. How do we then serve one another? If Jesus Christ is willing to get upon his knees and serve each of us and wash our feet, then how are we then to take that act, to take that symbolic act that Jesus does for us and carry it out into our lives? Who needs service in your life? Who needs to be cared for? Who is it that is usually humble in your world, and yet you need to find ways to humble yourself before them? Too often in this culture, we revere those who make it to the top, those who have acquired more than they need, those who are ruthless in some ways, those who do not care for anyone but themselves. But that is not who we are as Christians. That is not what it means to be a disciple. We are called to give of ourselves, to humble ourselves before one another, to be servant leaders, just as Jesus was the servant Messiah, the suffering Messiah, the one who came and gave grace to each and every one of us. So come this evening, come at 8 p.m., gather around the table. Go somewhere this evening and gather around the table, that you might look into the faces of those who are gathered around you and recognize that we are called to serve one another in this thing that we call the church, in this life that we call faith, in this body of Christ that we have been baptized into, that we are called to serve those gathered around the table and to serve those who do not come to this table. To be a servant, just as Jesus came to serve you and me. That is the message for this Maundy, Thursday, to think of ways that you might go out and be a servant to all the world, and for you to come and to begin this journey into Holy Weekend, that we might journey together. Amen.